Ever catch yourself, kind of daydreaming about the future? Like
Mhm.
really picturing where you'd be in 5, 10, 30 years. It's
Yeah,
like this thing we all do, right? This natural human fascination with, like, what am I going to become?
absolutely.
And you sent in this article, by the way, that takes this whole fascination to a whole nother level.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. It's all about using AI to actually interact with your future self.
Wow.
I got to say, this piece by Dr. Lance Elliott in Forbes, it really got me thinking.
It's a fascinating concept, for sure. And it's not like just some frivolous AI game. What Elliot's getting at here, it connects to this whole concept in psychology called self-continuity.
Self-continuity.
Yeah, basically it's how we understand ourselves as the same person across time, even as we grow and change.
Okay, so even though we're constantly evolving, there's still this core me that persists.
Exactly. And get this, Elliot brings in this research from Sedekides, Hong, and Wildschut. It was published in the Annual Review of Psychology just this year.
Oh, wow. So it's cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, really interesting. They dive deep into the different ways we experience this self-continuity thing.
Okay.
Like, think about it. We reminisce about our past selves, right? We picture our future selves. And somehow we weave all those versions into this single story.
It's like our brains are constantly working on this personal autobiography in the background.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But how does AI play into all of this?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Elliot, he proposes using something called generative AI as a sort of time machine.
Okay.
But before we go too far, it's important to understand what we're even talking about here.
Yeah, break it down for us.
Generative AI, in the simplest terms, it's this type of artificial intelligence that can actually create new content. Text, images, even music.
No way.
Yeah, based on the data it's been trained on.
So instead of just processing information, you're saying it's like using what it's learned to create something totally new.
Exactly. And in this case, we're talking about using it to actually generate a simulation of your future self.
Wait, hold on. So you feed it information about your life.
Yeah, like your aspirations, your fears, really anything if you feel like sharing.
Oh.
And the AI takes all that and it crafts this potential future you.
Okay, so is this like those, what do they call those? What will you look like when you're old apps? Or is this something totally different?
It's similar, I guess, in the sense that it uses your input to create a picture of the future. But this is way deeper than just like physical appearance.
Right.
This is about exploring those potential paths your life might take and like actually interacting with a version of yourself shaped by those experiences.
So it's less about getting an accurate prediction and more about like engaging in a thought experiment.
Precisely. It's about, prompting some self-reflection,
Yeah.
exploring different facets of yourself rather than trying to actually predict the future.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But how do you actually go about creating this like simulated future self? Is it super complicated? Do I need a degree in computer science?
Not at all. In fact, you know what Elliot uses as an example?
What's that?
ChatGPT.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, which is free, easy to access.
Totally.
He outlines 7 steps to actually set up this experience.
7 steps.
And it's surprisingly straightforward.
All right, walk me through it.
Okay, so first, you got to set the stage. You're basically telling the AI, hey, I want you to play the role of my future self. Like, you're giving it a character to embody.
So you're setting the scene for the interaction. What's next?
Then you start feeding it information about your current life.
Right.
What do you do? Your hobbies, who are the important people in your life, that kind of thing.
And the AI uses that to like build this foundation for this future you.
Exactly. And then you get to the really good stuff. Your hopes, your dreams for the future. This is where you can be as specific or as open-ended as you like. Maybe you've got these concrete career aspirations, or maybe you're more focused on like personal growth and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine this is where it starts to feel really personal.
It is. And to like really solidify that connection, Elliot suggests writing a letter
A letter?
to this future self.
Oh, wow.
Pouring out your thoughts, your dreams, maybe even some fears about what's ahead.
It's like sending a message in a bottle to the future. But instead of casting it out to sea, you're sending it directly to your future self.
Right.
I kind of love that.
It's a powerful image. And this is where the AI really takes over. It takes all that information you've given it, your current life, your aspirations, that heartfelt letter, and it starts weaving a narrative. It might generate like a backstory. Imagine how certain events in your life might have unfolded to lead you to this future point. It can even create this whole timeline of key moments in your future.
So it's like the AI is writing a choose-your-own-adventure story, but instead of picking from options, you're providing the raw material based on your own life.
That's a great way to put it. And just like a choose your own adventure, this experience, it can have different outcomes depending on, the direction you give the AI.
Oh, interesting.
For instance, when Elliot tried this, he first asked for like a pretty straightforward timeline.
Oh.
And ChatGPT, the AI he was using, it generated this, a rather predictable 30-year projection.
So it played it safe.
Yeah.
But I bet it gets more interesting than that, right? What happens when you push the AI a little further?
That's where it gets really fascinating. Elliot decided to see, what would happen if he prompted the AI to be a bit bolder,
Okay.
to imagine a future with some unexpected twists and turns.
Oh, I like where this is going.
And that's when things took an interesting turn.
Okay. You have to tell me more about this alternate timeline. What kind of curveballs did ChatGPT throw in?
Well, in this version, there were career challenges, personal setbacks, even a health scare got thrown in there.
Wow. It's like ChatGPT threw a wrench in the perfectly curated life it had created initially.
Exactly. And the point Elliot highlights here is that you have control. You can steer the AI towards a more realistic path or a more unpredictable one. Whatever you feel is going to be, most beneficial for your own self-reflection.
It's like choosing the difficulty level on a video game.
Yeah.
You can opt for the smooth, predictable path,
Right.
or you can crank up the difficulty and see what kind of curveballs life might throw at you.
And what's so compelling about this whole concept is that it's not just some fun thought experiment,
Really?
There's actual research that suggests that interacting with our future selves in this way, even through the lens of AI, can have a real psychological impact.
Really? I have to admit, my first thought was that it might actually increase anxiety, making people obsess over all the things that could go wrong in the future.
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But Elliot, he cites this fascinating study called Future You by Patter and Udaporn and a team of researchers. This study, it just came out last month, and it found that, get this, engaging in these conversations with these AI-generated future selves, it actually had the opposite effect.
What?
Yeah. Participants, they reported feeling less anxious and more connected to their future selves.
Wow, that is surprising. But why do you think that is? What is it about, interacting with these simulated futures that could have such a calming effect?
That's the million-dollar question. The researchers, they theorize that it might have to do with this concept of self-continuity, which, remember, we were talking about earlier.
Right, it's like that core me that persists through thick and thin.
Exactly. And what this research suggests is that interacting with these AI-generated future selves, even if they're not real, can actually strengthen our sense of that self-continuity.
Oh, interesting.
It's like by having a dialogue with these potential versions of ourselves, we start to feel more connected to who we might become. And that, in turn, could lead to a greater sense of peace, maybe even purpose in the present.
So it's like having a glimpse into the future, even if it's a fictional one, can somehow ground us in the present.
That's one way to think about it, yeah. It's almost as if by acknowledging and accepting these potential futures, the good and the bad, we kind of create space for a deeper understanding and acceptance of ourselves as we are right now.
That's fascinating. But I imagine it's important to remember that this is just an experiment. You're not actually getting a prophecy from the AI, right?
You got it. And Elliot is very clear about that in his article. He stresses that this whole exercise, it's not about taking the AI's output as gospel. It's about using it as this tool for self-discovery, and exploration.
So it's more about the process, the journey of interacting with these potential futures than the actual outcome.
Precisely. It's about the questions it prompts us to ask ourselves, the insights it might reveal about our values, our desires. It's about sparking our imagination, challenging us to think differently about who we are and who we might become.
It's almost like we're using the AI to hold up a mirror to our own, subconscious minds.
Yeah.
To see ourselves from this fresh perspective,
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is, just like with a real mirror, what we see reflected back might not always be what we expect, right? Sometimes it's flattering, sometimes it's confronting, but it's always illuminating.
I remember, years ago, I was considering this big career change. It felt like this huge fork in the road,
Yeah.
And I actually spent, days writing out these elaborate, almost movie-like scenes
Oh, wow.
of how life might play out if I chose one path versus the other.
That's a great example of how this natural impulse to envision our future plays out, right? And imagine you could have used AI to actually enrich that whole process, to add layers of detail, complexity you might not have considered on your own.
That's what's so cool about this. It's not just about passively receiving these predictions. It's about actively shaping, exploring those possibilities. Though, I'm not going to lie, it's still tempting to want to take the AI's output as some kind of, gospel truth.
Right.
Like, what if it stumbled upon this amazing insight about my life that I hadn't even thought of?
It's understandable, right? We almost can't help but look for those like, ha moments.
Totally.
But that's where, our human ability to think critically is so important. Because remember, the AI is only working with the information we feed it, right? It's reflecting our own biases, our desires, even our hidden fears back at us.
That reminds me of that saying, we accept the love we think we deserve. Maybe it's the same with, like, future selves. We tend to create the futures we believe we're capable of. Or maybe the ones we secretly fear we're destined for.
That's a really interesting connection. And it speaks to the power of this whole exercise. By interacting with these potential future selves, we're kind of forced to confront our own assumptions about what's even possible. We might uncover these hidden desires or anxieties that we weren't even consciously aware of.
Yeah.
It can be a really powerful tool for self-discovery if we approach it with the right mindset.
It's like, instead of just daydreaming about the future, we're having this dialogue with it. We're giving it a voice through the AI. And that voice, it's speaking volumes, even if it's ultimately our own voice echoing back to us.
Exactly. And just like with any meaningful dialogue, it can challenge our perspectives, make us question our assumptions, and ultimately it can help us grow.
And that growth, that deeper understanding of ourselves, that's where the real value lies, isn't it? More so than any specific prediction the AI could offer.
Absolutely. Eliot drives this point home so beautifully with two quotes he uses at the end of his article. First, he cites Peter Drucker. He famously said, "Trying to predict the future is like trying to drive down a country road at night with no lights while looking out the back window."
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
And a pretty bumpy ride, too.
Yeah.
But then he counters that with a quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said, "The most reliable way to predict the future is to create it."
I love that. It shifts the focus from passively trying to, foresee what's to come to actively shaping our own destinies.
Exactly. And while this whole AI-powered thought experiment, it can be incredibly fun and thought-provoking. At the end of the day, it's up to us to take action, to steer our lives in the direction we want to go.
Speaking of possibilities, your final thought for our listeners today takes this concept of interacting with our future selves to a whole nother level. I have to admit, when I read this, it kind of blew my mind.
Oh, good. I aim to please. So Eliot focused on interacting with a single future self, right? What if we could use AI to converse with, multiple potential versions of ourselves?
Multiple future selves. Now you're really making my head spin. How would that even work?
Well, think about it. What if you could have a conversation with the you who took that dream job abroad, the you who stayed in your hometown to raise a family, and maybe even the you who decided to, chuck it all and sail around the world?
It'd be like having access to all the different paths our lives could take all at once.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that be totally overwhelming? How could you even process all that information?
It would definitely be a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But instead of being overwhelming, imagine the insights you could gain from an experience like that.
Okay.
You could compare and contrast the values and priorities of each potential you.
Right.
Maybe you discover that, despite their vastly different paths, they all share this core set of values that have stayed constant.
It's like crowdsourcing wisdom, but from yourself.
Exactly.
And instead of just one perspective on the future, you'd have this whole panel of yous weighing in.
And think about this too. It might also highlight some of the fears or regrets that these different versions of you have.
Oh, that's interesting.
Perhaps the you that chased that high-powered career might express this longing for a simpler life, while the you who prioritized family over career might wonder, what if about that path not taken?
That's deep.
Yeah.
It really gets to the heart of those big life choices we make and how they shape who we become.
It does.
It's like that Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken.
Right.
Do you think any of these AI selves would have, regrets about the roads they didn't take?
It's a really intriguing question, isn't it? And while we can never know for sure what might have been this kind of AI-powered thought experiment,
Yeah.
it could maybe offer us a glimpse into those alternate realities and perhaps, help us to make peace with the choices we've made in our own lives.
It's both exciting and a little terrifying at the same time.
Right.
Like you're opening up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
But instead of unleashing chaos, you're unleashing possibilities.
And just like Pandora, our curiosity might get the better of us. But I do think, within those possibilities, within both the hopes and the fears of our multiple future selves,
Yeah.
there might lie these valuable clues to living a more fulfilling life right here, right now.
It's like the future, even when access through AI is never this fixed destination,
Right.
but rather this constantly evolving landscape of choices and possibilities.
I like that.
And who knows, maybe by interacting with these potential futures, we can nudge ourselves, even in these subtle ways, towards the path that resonates most deeply with who we truly are and who we aspire to be.
Beautifully said. And perhaps that's the most valuable takeaway from all of this.
Yeah.
The power to shape our futures. It doesn't lie in trying to predict what's to come, but in actively creating it one choice at a time.
I love that. Well, that was quite the deep dive. And honestly, I feel like I need some time to process all of this. To our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep exploring those future selves, both real and imagined.